Hola Miguel. Veo
Hola,
que
buenos
estás.
días.
Hola, buenos días.
A ver,
Eh, Nada, hacemos como otros días, nos silenciamos y vamos dando
sí,
paso a la gente. Voy dando paso a la gente.
sí, estoy contestando a Danica.
Ah, no he visto que había respondido. Vale, pues ahora hablamos, ¿vale?
Vale,
Venga, Miguel, hasta ahora.
hasta ahora. Hostia, Ana, Danica se va a conectar. O sea, se levanta de propio, que decimos en Aragón, a las 4 para estar en nuestra reunión de hoy y dice que estará en la que viene si no se puede cambiar la hora, vamos. O sea que, buah, tremendo.
Hola, Miguel. Good morning, Anne.
Hola, good morning.
Hi, Anne. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi.
I hope you can hear me. I have some unfortunately some noise on background, so I will mostly also try to keep for a while mostly muted. I don't know how much it currently disturbs you.
Nothing at all.
I will think we will manage. So.
Apparently nothing reached to our fine ears. So let's wait and see how many of us can gather.
Oh, Danica is connecting today?
Yes, that's what I was telling you before, Anna.
Okay.
Apparently, good morning,
Hi,
Danica.
Danica.
Good morning.
Nice to hear you.
It's good. It's 4 a.m. for me, so I'm here.
Yeah, very, very brave. It's now 4 a.m. in New Denver, Canada.
Yeah.
Wow. You
No,
don't have a yes?
yes, it is. Yeah. It's still black. It's still dark out.
Imagine. You don't have a bed at home to sleep in, or what are you doing at this early hour of the day? Anyway, thank you very much for being with us today.
Hi, Kenneth.
Hello everyone.
Good morning, Kenneth. Let's wait a little bit longer for any other members to show up. Let me see how many of us we should be at least from the
I think that we have just to wait to Jane Atherton because I think that she has confirmed.
Uh-huh.
So let's wait for some minutes if you are agree.
Not too long if we can help. So we should have at least Jane Atherton. We haven't had any news from Javier Cortez nor Chema Lopez. I'm gonna write a few words to Chema to see if he's going to be with us.
Morning.
Good morning, Jane. I'm trying to see if I can get confirmation at least from Chema Lopez. And I have no news either from the other group member. But if not, we will start in 1 minute, okay?
I can write Chema if you prefer, Miguel.
Okay, well, I've just sent a text, a WhatsApp to Chema. The other one, I don't have his number. But
Okay.
if you...
I'm going to write the link of the Miro panel just in case you want to add any information during the session. And if you have any problem to enter into it, just let me know.
All right, maybe we should start. We have 1 hour and a half ahead, but it's not necessary to use all the time. So if we can be done before that time, it will be perfect anyway. Well, let's recall a little bit why we're doing these meetings. This is a thematic group focusing on what the European Network for Rural Development, in a very brilliant choral work, defined as the main, the six actions to be undertaken in order to set up a rural proofing. So we already went through the first defined action, which was high-level commitment to rural proofing. We elaborate a little bit on this, and now it's the day for establishing a shared vision for rural areas. Sorry, this all with a view to trying to at least make an approach to, if we can, to identify the main, the key elements of each action to be assessed, because the final deliverable for this whole exercise has to be a methodology to assess the quality of any rural proofing in any country, in any region, according to the different these key aspects each of these 6 key actions should have. So coming back to the one for today, establishing a shared vision for rural areas. Well, I suggested, it's just suggestions. You could have add any other, or just consider that any of the proposed questions that I made is meaningless, for instance. Well, but in any case, at least just to try to organize a little bit our dialogue of today, I put forward 6-7 questions around this issue, establishing a shared vision for rural areas as a key action to undertake. And the first question I made, and I think I put it in advance in the last meeting, is if whether a proper diagnosis shouldn't be made with supporting data and evidence, of course, before even formulating a vision for rural areas. Because at least to me, it looked like we had to put the things in the proper or the logical succession of things. We are looking for a new vision or a given vision for rural areas because of something, because something is happening that requires that we develop such vision. And I thought that maybe supporting data, supporting evidence should be should go before we even try to define the vision and the purpose for that vision. I don't know, what do you think about this? If you want to take the floor, feel free to do so. If not, I will suggest that any or the whole of the group makes an opinion on it, if you have any. What do you think? Jane, you were the main factotum of this document. What do you feel about this question I'm putting forward?
I mean, I think So, well, there's maybe a number of comments that I could start with if that's helpful. It doesn't necessarily answer your question, but some thoughts that I'd had. I mean, I think one of the things that we said quite strongly in the ENRD paper was the need for any vision to be made through a collaboration with stakeholders. So we can come to the how to do that, I guess, but it needs to very much be a shared vision. So that would be the first thing. The how to do that is obviously the or part of the trickiness, and who those stakeholders are and how whoever you is, engage with them is something to think about. But that vision needs to be a shared one. And I guess different countries and different regions will have different mechanisms for designing that vision, whether it's through some sort of rural movement or rural parliament or rural stakeholder group, or there's different mechanisms. I mean, I think to get to the vision of to get that vision of where you want to be, you kind of need to know where you are now, and therefore you do need that data and evidence to be able to say, okay, this is where we are now, and this is where we want to get to, and to get from here to there, we need to do X, Y, and Z. So that data and evidence is always really important, but also in a rural context, difficult to get sometimes. Maybe the data isn't available to small enough, local enough scale, or there just isn't data on some things. That there are a number of challenges, obviously, around that. But the other thing was I suppose a reflection on the first meeting, and I was really struck, and hopefully I've understood this correctly, but that the rural proofing in Castilla is very much connected with demographic change and the need to, either stop out migration or reduce it or increase in migration. And that's, for me, quite, I suppose, a different way of thinking about rural proofing. So, well, maybe not a different way, but it's one way of thinking about rural proofing. So I know Professor Sally Shortall at Newcastle University, who's written lots on rural proofing, says we never know what we want the outcome of rural proofing to be. But I think in Castilla's case, that's a little bit different, because there is, or there could be, a clearly defined outcome. So, we want the population to grow by X%, or we want out migration to go down by X%. So that, for me, is a little bit different. Whereas, in other countries, rural proofing has been very much focused on as a process to try and improve outcomes for rural areas, but without really properly defining them. So I think that really, unless I've misunderstood, that really struck me as being something quite interesting about this case, that there is a clear outcome needed, and that, I think, helps to make a stronger case for that rural proofing process to happen. Whereas in other countries, there is evidence to suggest that when policymakers are asked to rural proof, they don't know why they're doing it. They're doing it to check whether there's different outcomes, or the potential for different outcomes in rural areas, but actually then what, and what actually is the outcome we want? It's always a little bit unclear. So maybe in this case, getting to the point of having that vision and articulating the role of rural proofing in getting to that vision, which is related to population, is somewhat, I don't know if easier is the right word, but is somewhat easier than in other countries where it's more vague.
Yes, definitely. That's why vision is so important, because if we are set up rural proofing, what is it aimed at? What's the purpose? The final, and what we have with us today, Kenneth Nordberg, who has studied very much. Well, first of all, the importance of the stakeholders' engagement, the rural stakeholders, but also he has elaborated on the concept of social territorial justice, which is something far more, let's say, polyedric in terms of what the final outcome could be, or the final impact could be in that or that territory, depending on our vision. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on what Jane has just told us, Kenneth, if you can give us some insight.
Well, I think I agree a lot with what Jane said, and I think the question about what data you need, that is it's important to know what topics you are discussing at what for instance in Finland the rural proofing is a lot, to a big extent, built on getting the data on where are the service and where are the employment opportunities and so on, and to get that on the table when you start discussing as much knowledge as possible. But then, as Jane said, also there's a lot of local knowledge and very specific things that you can't get hand of, that you need to get from the local communities and so on. Yeah, on the spatial justice aspect of this, it's important, to get the understanding of the geography also, and that is also very very much connected to the knowledge in the local communities, how the traditions there, how people move around and so on. There are things that aren't known outside the local community. Really, you need to have this connection to the local community. And again, if I refer to the Finnish experience of this, the experience in Finland, there is I think a model for rural proofing here in Finland that could be quite good and beneficial, because it elevates this element of having this communication and establishing these networks and local groups and regional level groups and so on. But the problem is that it's not used a lot. It's used very very sparsely, because it's not mandatory, and it's very it takes a lot of work for the people involved. So that is an issue also to consider what data should we have and what should the vision be and the aim and so on. I don't know. It was perhaps we can. This was I feel I was very unclear now on very many issues, but we could continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. In any case, if probably we could rethink or a little bit on what you commented on Castilla. When the ANRD suggested that the clear purpose must be stated and shared, but its outcomes should be mostly or namely improving living conditions through ensuring rural people also that they also have a fair and equitable right and access to resources and services regardless where they live. Well, the fact that this results in increase of population or more balanced demographics, it's let's say a collateral effect among many others, maybe not looked for at the beginning, but at least something that could be deemed positive, generally speaking, but not, let's say, the final end, or at least the main objective of a rural proofing scheme. I don't know if you agree with this, the other person. Yeah, Danica.
Yeah, I think like I'm in Canada and I'm in British Columbia, and like there's the one part of like there's almost two different ways of looking at rural proofing or a rural lens. One is like that idea of having, I don't know, maybe data or evidence that shows that rural communities don't have access to certain services, or, you know, less transportation or connectivity or whatever. And then the vision is to get a certain standard. Then the other way of looking at it, at least here, in both the national government and the provincial government, there's a commitment to gender-based analysis plus, and it's like an intersectional analysis framework where any kind of initiative, whether it's policy or a funding program or legislation, has to consider anyone who might be left behind or be negatively impacted. So it's not rural specific. So similar to Finland, there's like not a lot of like it's not mandatory, but it's kind of a part of that. And I think that people just don't think about it. Like they more so think about people with accessibility needs or gender or race. But if you think about rural, like one of the data and evidence pieces is like to demonstrate that rural areas have been left behind by government initiatives. So whether that's, you know, looking at, you know, funding programs or the way that certain regulations impact rural areas differently than urban areas. And I think going back to the session one, that data and evidence is really valuable in highlighting why rural proofing is needing, and also like where it could be implemented in really like tangible, concrete ways. Because someone said in the last session, like rural proofing can be very abstract, and people go, okay, how do I do this? What do I do? And without like those examples, they're not exactly sure what to do. And if you can show, like, look, you know, here are things that have been done that have not been as accessible or as supportive in rural areas, that gives them that like tangible thing to look at to then impact their own work. So I don't know if that all makes sense, but like I kind of see it like as two different types of data and evidence and two different visions. Like one is based on the rural community and one is based off of like the access to government initiatives, like equitable experiences of government initiatives.
That's very interesting. Dr. Heather Hall from the University of Waterloo, Ontario, pointed out that how important it should have been for the central government rural proofing existing in times, designed by the Rural Secretariat of Canada. How important it was to have told the story to society. I mean, not having rural proofing something that is behind the scenes, but just telling the society that, well, this works and this has accomplished this and that, and we are aiming at getting to these objectives because we have detected this or that. So it would help to keep social support, not only by rural stakeholders, but the whole society. It would have a reinforced support for rural proofing and for the investment of time and resources and so on, and budget that it's required to carry on. But on the other hand, you started also with another of the recurrent themes that come up when talking about rural areas is that, well, rural areas are lagging behind, and one of the aspects highlighted by the ENRD report was precisely to build a sort of positive language vision that also or mainly focuses on the opportunities or the all the things that could be happening in rural areas because of an improvement in our legislation, for instance. Do you want any of you want to make any comment on this, or have any idea on to what extent, because we need to assess the quality of this aspect of rural proofing. So to what extent we can monitor a little bit the way we construct our story, the story we have to tell to the society, to have the long-lasting and strong support that it needs. Does anyone to elaborate on this, or?
So if I could, I comment. So I wholly agree, because with all this rural proofing, sometimes there should be actually also some kind of demonstration or actually evaluation that we say that actually could do any kind of impact. But at the same time, to be very realistic, that probably the rural proofing in itself cannot solve some of very complicated regional development problems. So one of these a little bit, I don't know if I go a little bit off the topic, but related to this, as we are currently doing for SASA projects, this rural proofing survey. And I just, last year we finished in Estonia regional, it was actually bioeconomy related roadmaps for specific region. And one of the biggest issues related to this overall stakeholders is in both cases that I have stakeholders asking, okay, that you will have this rural proofing, let's see, a checklist, this policy on this making. But let's see that they actually, we get in the checklist that we expect different kind of results for rural areas, but then what? Will there actually be any kind of action? And like who makes this policy decision? And it was related a little bit on the issue on these stakeholders with this bioeconomy roadmaps, that we had this local engagement that, let's say, our own, for your own regional, let's say, what is your vision related to this? What is your resources? But this was connected disconnected with actually sort of regional policy level backing. And we're a little bit in situations that the stakeholders are annoyed that we are engaging them but we cannot say that what happens now after this, that we have these visions and situation. Would there kind of actions coming after this situation? So it's not related specifically to data, but this is something, and in Estonia's issue is that we are very small communities and the same stakeholders get asked over and over to be engaged. And I have already, we have this currently rural proofing questionnaire going on, and I already have it. So some of them ask, and okay, I can answer, but do you see that what now happens with this information? Is there any kind of real action coming sometimes, or you are doing it just to get a check mark for a project? So this is one of them, not related to this data, but related a little bit on this data. I put there also the comment. It's the same thing, that it's quite hard. That I think in a lot of cases in Estonian data is actually quite good and was related some of those portal and data initiatives they are developing, but it's constantly quite challenging. That I feel we don't have enough, and problem is that if we do one type of data collection for specific project strategy, and it would be this rural proofing, this is usually later, there is not follow up some years later to actually check did there any kind of impact. And I don't know what is a good way to solve it. Because it should have somebody on this also say higher political level actually have a clear commitment that the latest assessment will be coming with similar methodology, comparable data down the line, and this kind of commitment. What happens now after this down the line? So it's a little bit not your question, but the comment.
Thank you, Anwar. It's very useful what you said, as we were also talking about. I think Ari mentioned last week about participation fatigue, which is not, let's say, a physical fatigue, but the psychological fatigue of guessing or having that feeling that this comes to nothing at the end of the day. At this stage, however, we are defining vision, and probably the first outcome of a participating exercise about defining vision should be a document or manifesto that would summarize at least the expectations of all participants, a sort of first deliverable that would give feedback to the other stages of the process. But it should be not necessarily transmitted as it was quoted by those defining the issue with rural stakeholders, because the final target, the public that has to buy this vision is not only rural stakeholders, it's the whole society, because we're going to put all taxpayers' monies in it, and you need to convince them that your vision matches at least to their vision or what they expect from rural areas to be and become. So yes, any other opinions on this? Is it necessary to have a written document after that commonly created shared vision? Or just, I don't know how to communicate it. And that's why I'm missing Chema, he's a journalist and would have tell us a lot on this. But communicating, translating things and problems that are rural, from the many ruralities to urban, to the many urbanities that we have, is a challenge.
I just linked to that, the issue of the positive negative narrative, I think, is a really interesting one, and I don't know that I'm clear in my head about the right way forward. I mean, we have to be able to articulate the challenges and the barriers and the problems and make a case for rural proofing, but yeah, urbanites don't always want to hear about the challenges and how they have to sort of help to solve them, and I think you know, especially at the moment, the positive is so important with the the many resources and assets that rural areas have, and particularly can contribute to net zero and all the rest of it. I think that having that positive dialogue, having that positive narrative is so important as well. But how you bring the two together to say there's all of this great stuff, but there's all these challenges too, is a really tricky balancing act. I know our Scottish Rural and Islands Parliament, I think maybe 2 or 3 of our rural parliaments have come up with manifestos or frameworks at the end of them, but how much they are changing the mindsets of not just policymakers, but also society as a whole, I'm not sure. Kate, maybe you've got good reflections on Scotland.
I think there is a rural vision from urban people. Let's say, maybe idealized, but there's at least urban people have as well some kind of expectations regarding rural areas, and this is the place they massively go over the weekends and holidays, many of them. But there's far more in rural areas than the time where they come for holidays. In any case, shouldn't we dive into that rural-urban interaction or relationship in order to find the key elements of such a narrative? What do you think?
Yeah, I think urban people don't this is a big generalization, but don't necessarily understand where water comes from and food and energy and articulating that more effectively, and that we need to rural proof to release more of those positive attributes is maybe the narrative we need to take. So that the rural proofing needs to unlock the potential more. Sorry, Kate, I jumped in. I thought your hand was down, and apologies if I jumped out.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was just thinking it's one of the things that I think. So in trying to write the rural delivery plan, I'm bringing together those kind of positives and challenges that you were talking about. But there are times when you can kind of link through. So things like the flow of kind of food into urban areas and electricity production from wind farms and things like that. If you can try and sort of build almost like channels so that urban areas can see why they need to be supporting the rural areas with kind of, reliable food production and transport and everything else, because there's that kind of interconnectedness is my only answer to that. But it is a really, really difficult challenge trying to get urban and rural areas to kind of almost be on the same page, even though they should be.
Absolutely. In any case, anyone trying to introduce rural proofing or having one should make sure that at least that vision is as shared as possible by anybody, either urban or rural, because it's a common enterprise that has to be grasped. It's a challenge for any country, and it's an opportunity, and maybe rather a missing opportunity for everyone. So this dialogue at least should have these translators or these orientators in order to get to the final wording and the final set of different points of view that could make more acceptable rural proofing to the whole society. Tanika, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think in a Canadian context and also in other countries that have experienced colonization, there's some really good language around like economic reconciliation and around which is like separate, and there's an overlap. It's like a Venn diagram in these types of countries. So not as relevant for maybe a lot of places in Europe, but like there's a recognition that like indigenous communities are growing, fast growing, and fast growing in the economy as well, like in businesses and economic development, and becoming like very active partners in certain industries. And so like that the language around that is more developed, I think, than in just the rural context where, it's talking about how reconciliation is going to like unlock economic potential, like both for indigenous communities, but also then for the nation or the province as a whole. And so like that's relevant, especially when you have indigenous rural communities, because we do like there's so significant overlap here in this context. But that language can be similar, and I think some people were talking about that, like the idea of somehow explaining that by doing rural proofing, it's going to benefit everybody. And it's like in Canada, there's a lot of emphasis on tourism. You talked about that as well, like tourism to rural areas. People don't want to go to rural areas if there isn't, healthcare or restaurants or something like that. Because if they get hurt or sick, they want to make sure that they can be able to get the help that they need. And so it's like linking these things to be like, we need to support rural areas with certain equitable accesses to services because you want to visit there. And so and you want to make sure that that visit is safe and enjoyable and all of these things. Yeah, I know that was a bit rambly, but that was what I was thinking based off of some of the other comments.
Yes, Kate has written that. Can I read it, Kate? When we talk about a rural vision, I was speaking about a written vision. It is several sentences which attempt to cover the breadth of things we want to see in rural areas, or do we mean an approach with guiding principles which is more expensive? I've seen it done different ways. What do you think? In my opinion, it's both. But
I think it could be. The reason I ask is that somebody earlier on was talking about a kind of a vision in communities and a vision relating to policy people. And as a policy person, when we were asked to write a rural vision, a vision for rural Scotland, sorry, as part of the piece of work I'm working on. And as a policy person, that means creating this kind of couple of sentences which cover this enormous breadth of things. And the thing I struggle with on that is we need everybody to kind of share the same vision, but when you're trying to pack so much into such a small space, it becomes so high level that everyone kind of goes, yeah, that sounds about right, but the devil is in the detail. And I think that kind of the more expansive approach is actually probably more helpful in bringing policy people and legislation and governments together with communities to actually do something helpful, but it's a much more difficult thing to do. And so I'm not quite sure which approach we were talking about in this session. I didn't mean to throw a curveball in, but I thought it was worth just putting a hand up and asking about how you envision what this vision should be that we talk about.
Well, from the ENRD document, I would have said that it's rather about a written vision you can deliver to society to communicate and to socialize, let's say, the whole issue. But in fact, if we think of the guiding principles, the approach, the focus, I would take it rather for internal consumption, for internal use. Once you have that strong commitment and support and so on to go ahead and to carry on with it all. What do you think?
Thank you. I appreciate the answer, but I'll leave that to other people.
There's a part on this that also is very complex, because it's about explaining what, giving a definition of what is rural. But in fact, the first thing I would say is that we have many ruralities, so as to give a straightforward answer. Jane, can you tell us something?
I was thinking about this again a bit last night in preparation for this, and I think you're right. I think in the ENRD document we were thinking about the first thing, that sort of written vision. But I totally agree with Kate that when you start to try and do that, it becomes so high level. You know, we want sustainable rural communities or whatever. Everyone can agree to it, but actually it doesn't really help you because it doesn't get you much further forward. The other thing I was thinking, and this might be another spanner in the works, is, and this is one of the criticisms of rural proofing, is that it sort of separates rural out, and then you run the risk of it being sidelined. And I guess the risk of having a separate rural vision for any area is that rural somehow practically or mentally, I don't know, gets put over here, and actually that's not necessarily helpful. But if you had a general vision for a an area, whether it's a region or a country, maybe then if you visualize it, you have your general vision, and then you have something here about how rural contributes to that vision. And in order to help rural contribute, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And one of those things might be rural proofing. So that articulates how the positive, so how rural contributes to the vision, but also the challenges and the solutions to those challenges. Does that make sense? I suppose I'm going against what I said in the NRD document, which maybe isn't so helpful.
No, but it's fine. And I don't, I mean, we're starting to learn. So we probably will find out things that we have never seen or not before, and we can add it to our knowledge or general knowledge on the issue. That's it. So I think that makes it more fitter, let's say, for our purpose than just simply taking what a given document says and following it. Good luck. Anyway, Kenneth, can you take the floor?
Yeah, I just want to continue on what Jane said, and I have seen that in many cases here. That when you have this, you have perhaps a specific group that should discuss the rural issues, or that is often the way things are done. Then everybody else is thinking, no, the rural issue is over there in that group, but that group doesn't have the mandate to influence what is discussed in the other group, so the issue gets completely sidelined. So that's a very difficult thing to overcome, that you should put in this rural aspect in everything, and because there's a lot of other things that people want to discuss, and they have, their interests aren't at at that point. So I have argued sometimes that should we have this rural proofing at all? Should we have some proofing that is more overall, that because there are rural places that are well off and worse off, and there are urban places that are well off and worse off, that you can find difficulties everywhere. Of course, the rural issue is a specific issue, but this is just an idea that rural proofing might be a bad thing for rural areas also, in that way that you specify that this is backward places that have things to overcome. So I just wanted to elaborate on what Jane said, that this is actually a difficult problem to overcome, I think.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. We'll have to try to clarify these problematic aspects of this particular action, because it's not only the way you transmit a vision, but also to what extent a vision fits for all, far beyond let's say, these collateral impacts that a rural proofing could have, and that are in the compass of the different stakeholders, according to their own interests or situation or geography. But anyway, we have a diversity, but we can also have a diversity of views and a diversity of unexpected impacts that will be difficult to manage. In any case, and let's say anticipating this all, do you think that stakeholders politicians, well, all the ones who should have a say on this, shouldn't they be trained a little bit of what we had in our hands before we launch a participating process to get to a shared vision, or just from scratch, and let's see how they react and see if we can make something useful out of it? Because one of the problems probably is sort of distance and misunderstanding of what we are talking about, and this could bias some way the whole process, and because when someone is in a meeting and doesn't know what's the purpose for the meeting, anything is possible. So I would advise to have that, at least a short briefing on what we have in hands and what's the goal we want to achieve.
I will just comment. Yes, I will agree. And problem is also with the politician, obviously they change based on this election and kind of these issues. Who is constantly keeping up this background constant work of keeping the process in track. That is the politicians, and so these local levels is that have a good overview of explaining what is done so far, what is the aim, where does it go. So, and the probably idea I would say like Estonian cases ministry level or this, that where is the knowledge and more stable in terms of compared with those who politicians or who change with elections, that there is more clearly defined obviously roles, that who would be the champion and have this understanding and could be capable of constantly working on this explanation and providing this, why is it developed, why and where it has come so far, and so this would be important. So the concept tends to be kind of hard, because if I do, I'm doing research for 20 years related a lot of this socioeconomic assessment on rural areas and all these visions on the local level, and even I have like very hard time to keep track what is everything, what is going on, what the initiatives which when the policy is changing. So yeah, so some would be clear champion, or at least expectation who is the responsibility, have the understanding and keeping up this background information. Also, so if other take good, there's a constantly changing and renewing this network. So
absolutely. Do you, if you let me go on with some of the questions I suggested for this dialogue. To me, when we say that we should try to achieve an improved or improve living conditions and guaranteeing access to rights and resources and services, to me it's good. Well, but from that positive narrative we were talking about, maybe we should try to conduct the participatory process to share vision in a way that will stress also the opportunities beyond this basic social justice for rural areas. Don't you think so? I don't know if that's pertinent at that stage, but probably, because we are talking at this very stage about the narrative. So what kind of things do you think we could stress to call attention from the fact that this is a positive, a very paying back exercise to undertake? The ones who have rural proofing, for instance, in Scotland or Northern Ireland, do you find usually good arguments to say, hey, that's great, and And that's a good proof that we are making rural proofing a good business for everybody, because it's paying back, or can pay back, or not, or the ghost of we are in a needy situation, blah 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 blah, comes to visit us periodically. I'm curious, just curious about it.
This is the subject of our meeting tomorrow night. So we have a Scottish Parliament meeting tomorrow night, which is looking at rights. And I'll put some links in the chat, some really interesting work being done recently in Scotland around applying a human rights framework to understanding what we know as researchers to be very persistent and long-standing challenges. So I don't have any answers, but I might have after tomorrow night.
I will be there as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Anyone is welcome to come. So
as you can, I don't know if everyone received that link to the event.
I will put it in the chat now.
Yes, please, because maybe Danica, who arrived a little bit later, didn't get that. Well, it's interesting, very interesting, and it will be very useful for our reflections. And the last but not least thing I suggested, how can we be convincing when explaining that it is not an intolerable, unbearable workload, time and money in the decision-making process, that exercise of rural proofing? This, to me, is wild. But have you know of any success case on this aspect? Not in the United States, by the way, as Danica points out. Please, Kate.
So it's one of the issues that we have with Jane's help. Our team have developed a rural proofing tool slightly for policy teams, and the idea is to get rural proofing across Scottish Government. But one of the issues that we've got is we also have impact assessments, and we've had feedback from teams who have used our rural proofing tool who said it's a really good tool and it's really helpful, but where we've got all of the other kind of statutory requirements to think about equalities and business regulation, we can't fit that in. And one of the ideas that I've had that I don't know if it will come off, but I think would be quite useful, is there's a lot of the impact assessments that we have relate to business, rights of the child, island teams. There's like 6 of them, but they all have rural elements to them. And so I've been wondering about trying to weave the kind of rural proofing guidance that we've written into the guidance for all of those impact assessments. So it sort of slightly broadens them so that when people are thinking about the rights of the child and their policy, they think about where there are differences between rural children and urban children, and see if we can kind of weave it in that way rather than adding a kind of separate rural proofing tool, but kind of add it into everyone else's. I don't know if that will come off, and it may be that everybody tells me they're never going to touch that and they don't want to, but it's the best opportunity that I can think of to manage that problem.
It will be great to be successful at what you said, Kate, at your proposal, because yes, I was thinking when I wrote this sentence that for newcomers to rural proofing, it would be good to have reference of other places where they can actually demonstrate that it's having an impact, and that it's cost efficient to have rural proofing. There are many aspects that are merely qualitative, but some others are quantitative as well, and rural proofing can make a difference. So yeah, I wish you all the best in your endeavor. Great. Thank you for telling us about it. Does anyone anyone want to add something?
So sorry, I added this comment that impact assessment, that this would be clearly part of the process. And actually one thing that, because some of our unit previously has done these ex post evaluations, and even sometimes it could be just very simple solutions that for some of the measures, politics, even if we just have a locational data of whoever received the subsidies, or we would have been asked that please compare this against different based on the locational data. Even this could have been actually quite good information if we're doing it. But like I said, somebody should have this overview or this vision, like to ask this kind of information. So even this, so yeah.
Jane, please. Thank you, Anne.
I was just thinking about some of including the ENRD report, actually, some of the work I've done previously on rural proofing. It is very hard to find examples of good rural proofing, and to be able to say this was the challenge, this is what rural proofing told us, and this was what changed, and therefore so many more people benefited, or so many more businesses. And equally, what I don't think I've ever found is any examples of what would happen if we didn't rural proof. So, well, there's one example from the UK where the introduction of free bus travel, which is great if you have buses, but in many rural areas of Scotland there isn't there aren't buses. So being able to, and we all know what the impact would be for young people trying to get to work, or for older people trying to get to doctor's appointments, but to be able to tell that whole story in a way which is going to do it justice, but also include the a number that will be attractive to a politician. You often don't see that story told fully. And if we did see that more often, maybe it would help to make the case for rural proofing to be done. Sorry, I didn't explain that very well. I need my lunch.
But no, I think we all understood. At least I understood well what you meant. I think. Well, yeah, but so well at the end of the day, everything. Whenever you define a vision, comes to the formulation of some sort of territorial pact or strategy, whether in written in a manifesto or in other ways of deep effect in political and administrative structure. Let's hear what Danica has to tell us.
Yeah, can you hear me better now? Yes, okay. It was my earbuds then. Sorry about that. I think that one of the questions that you have, all of these are connected, but the one about in the orange, having equitable rights and access to resources and services, no less, but also no more. And then tying that to the idea of this intolerable workload, time, and money. It's all about scale. And I think that comes with both communicating it to rural areas and to policymakers, because sometimes there's this fear, even in rural areas, when people talk about growth or the attempt to repopulate areas. It's like, we don't want to become cities. We don't want to become way bigger than we are. We just want a certain level of sustainability. And same thing, it's like rural communities are not expecting to have the next, cancer research center, or have, like there's a certain acceptance of like, okay, I'm choosing to live in a rural area and I'm not, you know, I don't expect to have like everything that would be in an urban community. And so it's about like finding the vision of that balance of like, you know, there's a certain level of human rights. So I'm very interested in this thing tomorrow or today. It's tomorrow. I have to figure out the time change. And like, but it's not like you're trying to turn rural areas into cities, which would take way more workload and money and all of these things. And also not be accepted by rural communities. And so yeah, so I like kind of like linking the orange and the pink questions in that way.
Perhaps we could conclude that I mean, it's very easy to explain this dichotomy. When we think of delivering services to rural population, I mean, it's not that you have to build a big railway station and put the railway in each village. It is just how do you deliver transportation services. I mean, you cannot deliver it the same way in a very sparsely populated rural area than in a concentrated big city, because you have trains and metro and buses and all sorts of things. But in the rural areas, all this is absolutely unfit. You need to adapt. So it's rather about the logic of the things than to come to a basic but very important objective rather than trying to propose fully things. So that's a little bit what can make the difference. In any case, if I was president of Canada's rural areas, I would have a vision of Raga. Let's make rural areas great again. But I will not be the Donald Trump of any rural area, not of anything anyway. But that's not that kind of MAGA vision of things, but just how to make people's lives easy and satisfactory and give opportunities, because there are opportunities, but you have to organize them in a different way and very close to the actual circumstances of the people living there. That's it. It's as simple and as difficult as that. This chain.
And I guess that's why it's so important that we have people who can articulate what those differences are and how to solve them. So the paper I just put in the chat there was written by someone at Aberdeen University here in Scotland who was very interested in transport and accessibility. So, you know, that becomes critical to getting the people to that you know, world leading cancer center or whatever it happens to be. It's about expectations and wants and needs and how we find solutions, and that is where the data comes in, I think, to demonstrate that or how things might be possible, and the lived experience, including the lived experience data, to articulate how different things will work differently. So that evidence is important, and educating, that's not the right word, but policymakers to understand all of that is so important. And that's where the burden on stakeholders becomes really high. In Scotland, we're very lucky to have very active rural stakeholders, but some of them are paid, some of them are voluntary. And, you know, engaging them in the rural proofing process puts a big burden on them as well to keep working at it.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Annette?
Yes, I just thought of the experiences here in the places I have studied, that first that there is people doesn't expect much, just what you were talking about. They have chosen to live in a certain place that have certain specific services and certain specific resources and so on, and they don't want, you know, big things to come there. But of course they are afraid of losing what they have. For instance, if the transportation gets worse and they can't get out in the way that they have previously. And I think they're going back to this the necessity of accessing this local knowledge. Every place has its, you know, its traditions and you know, cultural connections and so on. As I have seen in the villages I have studied, that you can't see that good from the outside. What you know, what neighbors do they feel close to, for instance. When you start to plan where services should be, you need to know those, you know, cultural connections and how people move in everyday life and so on. You really need to have this very close communication to the local areas to know these things.
Thank you, Kenneth. Well, I don't know if you want to add something else. I think that we are very well provided with knowledge and opinions and doubts as well, so as to keep on working in the next phases of this project on the basis of what we have here today. So, well, if anyone has something to say, and if not, I will again give you thanks for your participation, for your contributions, and look forward to meeting again soon with you here in Cuenca, in Spain, in the country of Don Quixote, or anywhere. So, but soon. Well, take care of yourselves.
Miguel, one question. I want just two things. Thanks for having contributing to the Miro panel. Thank you very much. And I'm going to send you during these days an email related to Cuenca. So in case you want to come, you can start buying your flights or the transport you need. And I will send all the information during these days. Just this.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. So, well, farewell. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.